Hi guys, this week I have an extra video for you. I have an interview with Cunnington, or really it's more of a conversation where we talk about productivity as bloggers and how to get the right stuff done and how to figure out what's important to work on if you're just starting out with a site and also if you manage more like a portfolio of sites. So we talk about systems we use, processes, and we also talk just a little bit about life. So it's more a long format interview. It's not like 10 minutes and we crack out some points there. We talk about a lot of different things. So put on a good cup of coffee or find a beer that you really like and press play here when you have like an hour to watch this, because there's some good stuff in there, and let's get to it. Thank you guys for joining us today. I have Doug here with me again. It's always a pleasure. And today we're going to talk about productivity and how to get more stuff done. And this is something you know a lot about. So maybe you should just do like a super short introduction. I'm sure everybody on my channel know who you are.
I'm Doug Cunnington, and I blog over at Niche Site Project, and I have a YouTube channel and a podcast. I talk about affiliate marketing and SEO. But I got my start back in the corporate world as a management consultant, and I traveled around a little bit, and I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I was too young. I was right out of school, but eventually I learned some skills, and I did project management for sort of big software implementations. So I think I was always okay at productivity as far as completing things. I am good at starting something and finishing it, but the project management approach and a little bit more framework around it helped me a lot, especially in the corporate world where you have to work with a lot of different teams that often have opposing goals and they actually work against each other, even though they're supposed to work together. So I think I developed a lot of skills there. I started dabbling in the internet marketing world with affiliate marketing specifically in 2013. And in 2015, I got laid off. So this marked sort of a shift in, well, really my life and how I was working. So before that, I had a normal corporate job. Over the years, I've created courses where I needed to teach and help someone be productive while they're doing things on the side, which is exactly what I did. So I think I've developed some skills myself, refined some skills, and then figured out how to teach people who are very busy with family, with jobs, unfortunately, maybe even commuting and all these other things that they have to work on, and really just use the few hours per week that they may be able to spare to work on their side projects.
Yeah, because I mean that's reality for most of us, I think. I mean, I'm full time with this now. You're full time with this. I never had a real job. I used to joke, but for most people, this is something we do on the side, at least for a long time. And I mean, even if we manage to get to full time level, or if you're there already, maybe it's even more important at that point to get structured, because you might start working with a team and different stuff. So yeah, so we're going to talk about this from an publisher or blogger's angle, because I think there's some pretty unique stuff that we have to figure out in order to get productive, right?
Definitely. And I think, like you said, we all struggle with it. And I have several friends who are roughly our age and they're retired, and they don't, work full time like we do. Although I venture to guess that you and I probably don't work 40 hours a week. It's probably much less than that.
No,
most
closer
of the
to
time.
15 or 18 hours, I think.
Which is
For me.
perfect. So you have
Yeah.
to do some things and you have some structure, but you have some days where you can just hang out with family or go
Yeah.
travel or
Yeah, that's
even
my main
waste time.
priority right now, because I have a toddler, as you guys probably know. And so this is the part of my life where I have a toddler and that's not coming back. So that's also why I'm doing this and why I really, really enjoy having so much time on my hands. And I mean, when he starts school in a year, I know that my work time will probably double like this. But right now we enjoy having Max home an extra day per week, and we pick him up like 1 p.m. every day. So that's pretty neat and really something that I'm happy about. And that's also why, I mean, when you cut down your work as much as possible, while you also want to be progressive and you want to push the limits and you want to do whatever you can, I mean, that's probably the thing that pushed me the most, was the decision to work less hours, because then I needed to outsource. I needed to get more productive. I needed to get this thing done. I mean, if you work like 15 hours, it's not all right to spend the first hour just dabbling around with email and Facebook or whatever. You just need to get straight
do it, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you bring up some interesting points. I was chatting with a friend the other day, and he was really struggling on getting things done. He has three kids. He works as a contractor in with various companies. So he has multiple bosses, and then his wife is a very successful businesswoman. So she is very busy doing her stuff. So he has to spend a lot of time taking care of the kids and getting kids to school and all these things, right? And he was putting so much pressure on himself. He felt bad that he had, a full, list of things to do, but he wasn't getting it done. And the big advice that I gave him, I said, it's okay if you don't do everything that you have on your list. You're really ambitious, but you have young kids and your family's counting on you. That time is going to be gone before you know it.
Yeah,
So it's okay. I mean, sometimes it's okay to not be as productive as you feel like you can be or should be. And then a little
yeah,
confession. I mean, I'm pretty productive. I like to pride myself on that. That's why we're talking. But there are days or weeks where I phone it in because you need a break sometimes. So I'll go hard for a few weeks, and then it's okay. Maybe one day I didn't sleep that well. Maybe it's a little more stressful. Maybe something unexpected happens, right? That actually
yeah,
happens almost every day. Something
yeah,
happens and
yeah,
your plans are out the window.
yeah.
So
Life
you have to,
happens. Yeah,
you got to adapt. So I want to emphasize that you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself where you feel bad, but at the same time, you have to understand your priorities.
yeah. I want to ask you like for some ninja tips. I noted a few things that I do myself, and we also chat a little bit prior to this. Um, yeah, what are some of the things that you have found to be really helpful in our line of business?
I think it's really important to have sort of a clear mind. So before we even get to getting the things done, I often in the past, and it still happens occasionally, I'll feel overwhelmed. And those are the things where I wake up in the middle of the night and then I can't go back to sleep because I keep ruminating in my brain over and over about this thing. Of course, most of the time when I wake up, it turns out everything was fine. Your
Yeah,
brain isn't very reliable in the middle of the night. So sometimes
no,
you just have to ignore it.
yeah,
So in the morning, I would wake up and I would just do a brain dump. I would literally just
yeah,
write down all my thoughts. Sometimes it would be organized. It doesn't even matter, but it's a brain dump. And then you can go back and resort things and prioritize it. Normally, if I do that, I'll feel much more calm and it's out of my brain. There's a lot of different
hmm,
productivity methods that rely on some form of getting the thoughts out of your head so that you stop worrying about it
yeah.
as much. And once that stress is gone, you feel much better. So you were nodding. Do you do something similar occasionally?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I have too much on my plate, sometimes it just starts boiling in my head, right? And I wake up at night, like you said there. And I've used my wife many times in those cases. I'll just give her a piece of paper, and we'll do exactly that. We just get everything down, and she's very structured. I'm very chaotic by nature, so I have to. I mean, I really, really have to work on these things. She's more natural with these things, so then she helped me. Sort the thing into boxes. What's urgent, what's important, and just really just getting some handles on these things because it's typically because it's boiling over somewhere. There's just too much. You're losing the overview, right? And yeah, that's typically the point where it will wake you up at night because there's a little too much in there, right? You need to get it down there to use. I have a good friend. He says use the paper to remember and your brain to think, and I really really like that. That really resonates a lot with me.
Oh yeah. So once you have that out of the way and you're thinking a little more clearly, you're not in a stressed situation. Pure focus on one thing is so helpful. I know it's not always possible. Sometimes the thing that you need to work on might take several hours and multiple sessions. Maybe you don't have a 3 hour block to work on something and you only have 45 minutes. So there's some constraints you have to think about. But
Yeah,
for me, and it's one of the areas that I sort of excelled at work when uh, maybe a team member had some catastrophic like issue and they needed it solved. A lot of times, at least at my old job, we had all these different responsibilities. So people would often just spread themselves really thin and they weren't able to focus on the thing. So my manager would come to me and say, "Hey, I need you to resolve this issue, take it over from someone else." And it was because I had super focus where I would ignore everything else. So those other fires that are going on, someone else would handle them. So I would bow out, and that's the key. Other things you will have to ignore. With sole focus on a single thing, you have to stop worrying about it. And the thing is, you can't have everything at number one priority. By definition, there's going to be different levels. Priorities, I think I read this somewhere. Priorities wasn't a word, it was just priority until, sometime later. So it was only a singular word because you could only have one priority. Now, realistically, you can rank things and you could say, we have our priorities here, and the hierarchy of how to deal with them. But that is probably the key thing. And, you see this sometimes where people will say, I just get a note card or a Post-it note, and I will write 3 things on that note that I could work on the next day. And maybe they only get to work on one of those items, but it was with a big block of work, a lot of effort and a lot of focus. So they made a lot of progress in that one area. Normally those are the days where I feel like I got a lot done and I feel good about it.
And exactly like you said there, like those stretches of uninterrupted work, those are really important to get in the zone, right? That's something I do, I would say, almost on a daily basis. The days that I do work, I like to always start before I open my email and before I look at my phone. I might look at my phone, but I'll definitely put it on flight mode when I start working on that one important thing. I always try to get one important thing off the checklist before I start doing anything else. And typically something that takes like more than half an hour. Many times I'll start with just getting the small stuff done, things that shouldn't even be on the list. If it's 2 minutes, if it's a 1 minute thing, I just quickly see what I can weed out in 15 minutes. And then I get to this one major thing that I just really want to do. I want to get this blog post out of the way. I want to shoot this video. I want to find this new writer or talk to this editor that had some issues or whatever. And then I just put my phone away, and I like to have a completely clean desk and then just work uninterrupted on that one thing if possible. And that's typically possible when Max is in the kindergarten and Maria's upstairs and I have the basement for myself.
Right.
Is that something you do as well? Starting with just like one thing before you attend to all that other stuff?
Usually not. So usually I'll do a little exercise. I'll have my normal, have some coffee. I'll walk the dog for a couple miles. And there's a good chance, probably 80% of the time, I do pop open my email and have a look at just idiotic social media, right? So I look at Instagram just to waste time. So I do so there's hope by the way, for people. I'm fairly productive, right? But you can have different styles where you do the things that you're, quote, not supposed to do, like check your email and kind of get pulled. Now, I don't get sucked in. I don't get sucked into a rabbit hole where I am, working on someone else's agenda via email. Luckily, in our line of work, we could kind of steer our direction. So I'll take a look just to make sure. But yeah, I make all the sort of fatal flaws you're not supposed to do for productivity. But when I do come down to work, I usually will be focused and I can limit distraction. So I don't I need to clean my desk. It's kind of a wreck. There's Post-it notes everywhere. There's probably trash on the desk too. So it's a wreck. It doesn't look pretty, but things are happening. My phone, I usually don't turn that off either. So all the key steps that you're mentioning, I encourage people to do it. But realistically, sometimes people like myself don't have the discipline to do it yet.
Yeah,
you can still.
I wouldn't say
push
that I
through.
do it every day, but I think most days actually I do turn off my phone. Also because if I'm shooting video, if I'm editing video, it's just very, very frustrating to get out of the zone. Or maybe maybe it will make a ringing noise or whatever that will interrupt me. So due to the nature of the work, I do also sometimes, if I'm recording stuff, of course I have to turn it off. But then I try to just leave it in the shelf. And I have this little shelf unit thing here on my table where I have one of the drawers always be empty, so I could just pop everything in there when I start working, because I mean, that's just how my mind works. If my desk is filled with stuff, then I have a hard time focusing, because I mean, I'm just my brain is all over the place if I don't tell it to behave.
And that is, I mean, it's really the right way to do it. And occasionally I'll use procrastinate, or I'll use cleaning as procrastination. So I'm like, oh, I should clean my desk. And really, I mean, it's keeping me from doing the work. So anyway,
Yeah.
we all have our systems, and
Yeah.
ideally I would turn off that stuff. But yeah, I guess I've arrived at a system that works for me most of the time.
Cool. So tell us more about that system. I'm excited to hear how this works for you, because I know this is something that you have given a lot of thought.
So usually I like to work in sort of sprints of work, somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. That's when I'm most effective. And for example, I've launched several courses in the last year. Some of them quite large, some of them a little smaller. And you've done a course, Morton, so you know, however much work you thought it was going to be, it's probably turned out to be like 4 to 6 times more work than you thought, right?
Yeah, it's always more work than you think.
It's amazing. And it takes you much longer than you thought it was going to, each step of the way. And you think you would learn, but we don't. We don't learn. It takes longer.
Yeah.
So I'm really good at focusing for that period of time. And this is kind of where the project management stuff comes in pretty handy. I think if you're diving into a big project like that, so maybe you're launching a new site, for example. So you should have a pretty good idea of the phases that you're going to work through, and, you know, list those out. Think of this like an outline. So there's going to be some high level areas of work, and you could sort of expand on each one of those so that you have tasks. And maybe it's, you know, sub phases and then tasks and then subtasks, but you can really like break it down. And I think it's really important, even though we know that the plan is going to change, to go ahead and list out what you think the steps are going to be. And guaranteed 100%, even if you have done the project before, things are going to change because of unexpected variables or inputs.
Yes.
But there's great value in sort of picturing it in your mind, writing it down on paper, and then you have something to work from. From there, you could divide it into, you know, smaller tasks, like I said, but you could kind of look at that first phase and then scope out that work on top of a timeline. And then what I like to do is go, you know, really granular, so that you end up with something like a 45-minute block of work, up to maybe 3 hours, depending on your work style. And that way you could sort of chunk it out. And that's super helpful when you have a lot of other, you know, time demanding things that you have to work on, because you may only have 45 minutes to work on a particular day. And you could look at your list at that phase and just identify that. Along the way, and without going into too much detail and making it complicated, there are some things that have a dependency on others. So if you're building a website, for example, you can't start writing the content until you find your keywords, and you can't write and you can't find your keywords until you know what niche you're working on. So there's a few things that you have to do ahead of time for certain tasks. You can think of them as having a dependency, or one's a prerequisite for the other. And that's really helpful as you're figuring out what to work on. There's some things that are in the critical path where you have to do those before you get to the next one. Everything else beyond the project is dependent on knowing your niche and understanding a few keywords to get started, for example.
Do you use any specific tools or software, or like, you know, people use Trello or Asana, or I can say what I use, but I am excited to hear where you throw everything in when you do that brain dump. Where do you organize things?
Most of the time, I'm trying to just use paper and pencil. It kind of pulls me away from some of the distractions on
old school. I like
laptops.
it.
So I have just a cheap notebook from, you know, it costs like $8 or something like that. Nothing fancy, not a Moleskine or anything. It's an off-brand, and it works fine. And then legal pads are great. So that's where I like to do some of the thinking and brain dump and some of those things just to get away from the computer.
Yeah.
And for some of the content management that I do, I really like Trello. It's very easy to use for people that are on my team that maybe
Yeah.
haven't used other project management software, because I've used many different apps over the years, and there's
Yeah, I believe
all
so.
sorts of
Yeah.
productivity apps too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Trello is
Trello's,
great. It's very intuitive and very, very easy.
you could just watch a video or two, and it's just so simple, and it works great for all sorts of different projects. But I've used it when I created a few of the courses, so I would just map out every lesson to every unit, and then I could see exactly what I was
Mm.
working on. There's checklists within the card, so maybe it's scripts, videos, editing, and then other copy related to it. So I manage the whole
Yeah.
thing in Trello, and then I use it for my podcast and for YouTube content
Hmm.
management, where I work with an assistant who's more of a sort of an executive assistant, and then one that is a video editor. So we all work within
Mm.
Trello, and it's really
Yeah.
easy to see what work has been done and who is the next step along the way here.
Yeah, and I mean, there's systems that you can use. I mean, like you pen and paper that doesn't really work with the team. So I have a tool that I use for stuff that's only for me. That's just my own way of ordering things. I use something called Workflowy. I think it's similar if people know another system called Dynalists, where you just have this breadcrumb breadcrumb structure where you can sort of open a new level under every level. You can open and close those. So that's just for me to keep a checklist or a list of what's mostly important. And I try to just have no more than a handful there. Then I have a little folder called the next tasks, or I think that's what I call them. So I know what to focus on. But when I collaborate with somebody else, I mean, for managing my team and my writers, my editors and stuff, I use ClickUp. So it's I have this idea that is developed by publishers. I don't know. I want to get them on my YouTube channel. I haven't reached out to them yet, but I feel like it's very, very awesome for managing content production, whether it be YouTube or creating blogs and so on. So I have a space for each website, and then I can assign people to this space, and I can have different lists in there, and each item on the list, like, I mean, this is probably the same in Trello and Asana. Every item there will be an article, then it can change hands and change status from it starts as writer needed, a writer will grab it and forward it to an editor who will forward it to whatever. So that sort of has this flow for each article. I guess this is pretty similar to what Trello does, right?
Yep. And I think, I mean, the big takeaway here is most of the tools probably going to be okay. It doesn't really matter which tool you use, as long as it doesn't bog you down. And two sort of side thoughts. One, I used to use Workflowy all the time. In fact, one of my first courses, I
interesting.
built almost completely within Workflowy. And it is, I really like the interface and how it mostly just stays out of the way for whatever you need to do.
Yeah, it's extremely clean and very, very minimal. I don't think you could strip anything more away without, getting everything away.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really just, if I had to describe it, it's like a text editor with a hierarchy and a way for you to hide things that aren't relevant at the time, which is great for productivity.
Yeah, like tiered checklists. You can open a checklist and have a sub checklist and a sub checklist and another one.
Super cool. And
or to-do list.
I can't remember why I stopped using it. I think I just started like writing elsewhere, and just there was no reason. It's a fine tool.
I think my wife found it like around a decade ago when we were just starting out with Go Downsize, and we had to do some stuff together, and we hired an editor for the YouTube channel, and it was the first time we were really working with a small team. And she used it and she showed it to me. It's like, what? That's really cool, because everything up to that point for me was in Excel, which really suck at this because you have to look at everything all the time. So getting from Excel to Workflow was like, I felt like I just skipped right from stage number 1 to stage 5, like to stealth mode.
Right. That's funny. So the other thought that I had was it doesn't matter what tool, and really the most important thing is focusing and getting the work done and executing. So the person that I mentioned before who was sort of overwhelmed with all the things in his life, he felt bad about not getting things done, and he created a full project plan at my recommendation. And what he did
Mm,
was he created something beautiful, right? He worked in Excel, and he had everything formatted really well. And the thing is, I've seen him do this before. He's really good at wasting time on creating the project plan that he's never going to execute.
hmm.
So
Yeah.
he'd be better off working on, writing it in the sand if he actually did the work. So the tool doesn't matter. I'm
Mm,
completely agnostic. If people want to work off
yeah.
of post-it notes and put it on the wall, like
Yeah.
Kanban style, that's great too. Whatever you want to do. You want a
Yeah.
whiteboard, you want to write it on a chalkboard,
Yeah.
I don't care. Like the cool thing is, as long as you're getting the work done that like moves the needle and
Hmm.
is the most important thing for you to get done,
Yeah.
that's great. It doesn't matter what tool.
Yeah, I think that's also why there are an abundance of systems. I mean, there's so many project management systems and CRMs and what have we. I mean, just the big ones. I mean, Trello, Asana, now ClickUp, and there's just so many of those. And as you know, I used to work with SEO clients, and they got bigger and bigger, and the teams got bigger and bigger. So I just had to get into their systems all the time. There's just no way I could migrate them into anything else if they were like a huge team already. So I used to work like I had logins for every system out there at the time, and like that was like 4 or 5, 6 years ago. So I that gave me a window into so many systems, and many times I hated it because you had to remember where the buttons was because there's just so many systems. But then again, I think it just also showed me like there's so many ways to do this, and like you said, it doesn't really matter at all. I mean, you could put it on the wall, write it on the floor if you want to, as long as it helps you get stuff done, right?
Right. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think, part of the issue with, I guess, some people who are having trouble with productivity is just the distractions that are available. And if it is your side project, for example, you may need to go check something in your email, and then you get pulled off into another direction from
Hmm.
having to go do a valid check in your email, and then you get
Yeah.
distracted in some other area. So, I mean, I think that may be the
Yeah.
biggest enemy if someone's struggling with just focusing.
Yeah. That's always the thing that gets me off my desired path. Is always the email, because I need to send somebody an email, and when now I pop it up, there's this interesting email. I always open something else, and many times I can't remember who I was going to write what. And then all of a sudden I wasted, I wouldn't say I wasted it, but I'm answering some emails, but I have no idea about what I was about to do. So I need to really need to work on that one. I think email is a major one.
Yep.
It's hard to get rid of, right?
Especially with what we do, I get so many emails, and we have YouTube channels and things that we work on, so we get pitches
Yeah.
for things, and some of it could be okay, and some of it
Yep.
may not be, and then there's just
Yeah.
random noise in there.
Do you do all your emails yourself, or do you have somebody to weed it out before it gets to you?
I have my executive assistant does help out some. It doesn't do nearly as much as I would hope, and part of it is like letting
Okay.
go. I think probably the right
Mm.
way to do it, and very soon I'm going to be going on vacation for a little while, but I think the right way to do it
Ah,
is
sweet.
just to batch my emails. So really
Yeah.
just ignore it, and people will have the expectation that if you email me, it may be, 3 or 4 days. Because right now what happens is sometimes I just let it fall to the bottom, and then I'll reply back like
Mm.
5 or 6 days later, or sometimes like 2 weeks if it was a non-urgent thing. And it would probably, and
Yeah.
I'm in the inbox multiple times per day. So it would probably be better if I said
Yeah.
Tuesdays and Fridays, I'm going to sit down for 2 hours and do the emails. And probably I wouldn't even
Hmm.
use the 2 hours. I could probably just blast through if I batch it. And the other thing is, I realized I learned this from a Charles Duhigg book. I think it's his productivity book, but you don't have to write a super long response, especially at the volume of emails that you and I probably get. If I can
Yeah.
answer it in one sentence instead of a more uh, maybe
Yeah.
longer narrative of a paragraph or something, I'll just answer short, maybe two short sentences and not as
Yeah.
thorough, but at least I got it off my plate. Person has the answer. Hopefully they didn't
Yeah.
get their feelings hurt, but they got an answer back. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great way to do it. I also work with templates. I'm just using Gmail. So there's all these templates you can set up. So I do have templates because I have so many people from YouTube treating me like a customer support for everything from AdSense and the Zoic to Google to WordPress or whatever. They'll just email me the weirdest questions. And I have these templates that I just shoot them back explaining, like in a long form, why I cannot help them, why I cannot be their personal customer support, and how they need to get in the community if I should help them out. But so that's one way I do it. But I also really like to just keep it short. Emails shouldn't be essays, right? They should just be straight to the point, because nobody benefits from reading long emails. We all hate them, right?
Yep. And I think I do use like canned responses as well for, you know,
Yeah, that's what they
yep,
call it. Yeah.
it's a great tool. And actually, that's what my assistant uses most of the time. So there's sort of general
Yeah.
questions. There's just a blanket. Here I've answered like 90% of the questions anyone might ask.
Yeah.
But if it's not covered there,
Yeah.
then and it sounds like you're a lot nicer than me, just in general. But they, I point them in the right direction. And the problem is sometimes, you know, people are asking a valid question. We're friendly. At least we appear friendly on our YouTube videos. So people think, hey, I'm going to shoot this guy an email. But, you know, we've gotten that question 1,000 times. And it turns out we already have like 3 videos on it. And then we've answered it in our blog.
Yeah.
So, you know, we gently push them in that direction. So
Yeah.
definitely use those. And if people can identify a common task, I use keyboard shortcuts as well. Just text snippets.
Yeah.
And those save a lot of time. Even simple stuff like typing in.
Are you talking Gmail still with shortcuts?
No, actually, I'm talking. I use like the Mac built-in feature, so you could just program those keyboard shortcuts. So I have like,
For sentences or responses? Or
yeah,
what?
anything you want, anything you want. It just replaces the text.
I really need to look into that.
It's built into like Mac keyboard section there.
Okay, so you just assign like a pattern of keys, and then you press those, and it will do.
Yep.
Press out like sentence or whatever.
Yep. Whatever you want it to do. So just quick, easy example, my email address, right? I could type it pretty fast, but I also could just do a keyboard shortcut. So mine is exclamation EMGM, and then it just puts in my email. So I have used some other apps that are a little bit more user friendly than using the built-in system. But over the years, you know, they're like, hey, you got to upgrade to the next system. I'm like, I already paid like $50. Like, why? Like, I like this version. I don't need the new version. So I've been using the built-in, but yeah. And you could do long sentences, paragraphs, whatever that you write. So I have.
That's cool. I'm a huge fan of shortcuts. I mean, I use it so much. I use iMovie for my video editing. And I use what was it? The Gutenberg editor. I'm forcing myself to learn the shortcuts. I'm trying to learn all of them, learn them by heart, just use them so I don't have to move the mouse, because those tiny clicks it's not a lot of time, but it's also moving the mouse so much. It also hurts your wrist if you're working in sprints sometimes. I have periods where I like to write a ton of content. Just really, really churn out a lot of stuff. And if you do that, it's just important to minimize the mouse movement also, right? So I really need to get into like more general shortcuts built into the Mac, because I love shortcuts.
Yeah. And I think if you can learn them in the apps that you use most often, it will save a lot of time. Yeah. Moving the mouse is one of the worst, like it's the slowest thing you could do.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw, it was a huge YouTuber. I don't want to mention her name, but she's like 200,000 subscribers, and she was showing how she was using Gutenberg. And I mean, she probably have like several hundred blog posts, like really, really major blog posts, like on competitive topics. And she was showing how she did it. She was just filming herself. She would click up and bold something, click up and choose a block, move it around. Everything was using that mouse. It's like, I could have saved you like a few minutes there for each. I mean, you just need to learn those 10 shortcuts, right?
Yep.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, and I had a friend that I used to work with, and he was like that with Excel. So this was back in the corporate days, and we had huge spreadsheets, really complicated.
Yeah, Excel is huge with shortcuts.
He could do everything because we were working on these tiny laptops with small screens.
So impressive.
So he was doing everything, and he was working in front of people too, right? So we're all collaboratively working on something. We don't even know what he's doing. We're asking him how he has made those changes. But yeah, he's copying, pasting, like just putting in functions, doing all this crazy stuff with it, never lifting his fingers from the keyboard.
Yeah, I guess I'm just totally geeking out on it. It sounds so stupid when you say you can save a few seconds, but I mean, it adds up, right?
it does. And, I go back. I'm a slow typer too. So one thing I haven't mentioned this in a really long time. So, there's different keyboard formats, right? So there's one called Dvorak.
Yeah.
And for the people that don't know, it's not the QWERTY style. So the keys are just assigned to different places. So about 6-7 years ago, I heard the creator of WordPress on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he said, "Oh, I use Dvorak for my keyboard, blah blah blah." So
I think I heard that same one.
Yeah.
This is a pretty great podcast. Let's do a shout out to Tim Ferriss's podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah, and
very, very long ones and very, very in depth.
Amazing interviews. And so Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, said he types in Dvorak. So I looked it up, and basically the keys that are most commonly used are under your fingers. So there's the stats are something like you're moving your finger something like 70% less than the QWERTY style. Now the downside is for about a year, I went from, not typing very fast at probably like 35 to 40 words per minute. Not very good. And I went down to probably like 8 to 10 words per minute. I mean, it's like learning a new language. So I now can type as fast as I did before. The point that I'm making here, there is a point. You mentioned the person who was using all these mouse clicks, and we're talking about saving seconds. Yeah. I still type really slow. I'm moving my fingers less, and I'm slower at a lot of things than other people. So the point is, if you work on the important things that really make a difference, like creating a course or like figuring out the critical path in your project, you can make progress and be successful without being really efficient at something. We're talking about being effective in finishing important things. So let's say,
very important.
I was really efficient, right? We think we want to be efficient, which is good if you can be efficient. But let's say I was efficient at inbox zero, and I spent 6 hours a day, every day working on email. People would get answers quickly, but it turns out me answering emails generally doesn't do anything to move me forward. Sometimes they do. So that's why I look at my emails, but usually it's probably like 1% of the emails that I get. Yeah. So if I ignore emails and only check it twice a week, but I've spent my time on things where it's important if I'm effective, then I win, right? We have to make sure we're playing the game that we want to play with the rules that we outline versus, me spending, 18 hours a week on emails.
Really also like the difference between being busy and really working on the thing that matters, right? It's so easy to just get busy.
And the tough part is we have sort of created lives for ourselves where we have a lot more free time, and we're in a fortunate, luxurious position where we can work fewer hours than a normal corporate job. But we also accidentally got really good at being busy. So one thing that's a struggle for me, maybe for you too, Morten, where if you have free time, you accidentally fill it because you're so used to being busy. So is that a problem you have?
Yeah, I'm always trying to do stuff fast. I mean, even when I'm not doing something, I will run between the kitchen and the toilet, but just to save time because I like to be busy. It's so stupid.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
I try to chill more, but it's just in my DNA to do things as quickly and efficient as possible. I think it's kind of stupid.
yeah. I mean, it has its
It gives me satisfaction somehow, I
it
think.
has its place, in certain times. But yeah, I am trying to be aware of that. And I mentioned to you, I'm taking some time off, going on vacation, and I try to unplug. I'm trying to do this more often, where I actually let my brain settle down, and I'm out in nature a little bit more, and don't even
Yeah.
open my laptop, and maybe I.
Yeah, and do a few things at a slow pace.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I force myself to take a little walk. Just walk slowly. It doesn't always work. It rarely works, but just the challenge of taking a 5 minute walk and just walk really slow. I mean, that can do something to your brain, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you do like endurance sports or anything?
No, not at the moment. I used to go a lot to the gym, but I just don't prioritize it right now. I want to have like what do you call it, a rowing
Yeah,
machine?
yeah.
That's what we call it in Danish. Yeah, or something, so I can do something at home here because I'm next door here. I'm building a home gym. So I'm going to do something because I don't have the time to do it. But I used to run in the gym. Weirdly enough, I like to run indoor. I don't like so much running outdoors. Also because Denmark is 80% winter and 20% spring.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's just how it
Yeah.
is.
It's like winter and then muddy season, right?
Yeah, we only have the shoulder
Yeah.
seasons, so it kind of sucks. I mean, getting into it, it's just so stupid. I used to live in Oslo, and that's in the capital of Norway. For people who don't know where I'm at, but I'm in Denmark. And the thing is, if we could just move like 1 hour by airplane further up north, we would be in Oslo, and then we would have beautiful white winters and also pretty all right summers, and we would have mountains. But I'm in Denmark. I'm so close to having snow every winter, but we just have this slush ice season forever where it's raining and snowing, but it never stays. And we have that so much. And if you get further down south, you get into mainland Germany, and they have great stable weather. We are close to the coast. We have like 1 hour on each side in Denmark to the coast. So we were always had changing weathers all the time. We have like weather forecast like 10 days, 10 times a day on the radio because it changes rapidly and it's always for the worse.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't
It's
realize
a
that.
stupid place to live when you can live everywhere you want, right?
Yeah, I've never been.
By the way, we also have the highest tax system. I don't know why I'm still
Yeah, go to Norway. That sounds a little more.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So I can't remember what I was saying there.
No. Okay, I'll try and ask you something. So, mention one more tool that you really enjoy using, or some practice that you that you enjoy, and maybe in working with your team of writers or editors. I can't remember exactly how much of a team you have right now.
So I have a fairly small team right now, just a video editor and then my executive assistant. And I used to have sort of larger content teams. And and I think you and I do a similar sort of hiring process where we hire some writers and promote from within. It sounds like we do it very similarly.
Yeah, that's also what I remember.
And the thing that I try to do is just keep it simple. You could always make things complicated later. So I often would just use a Google Sheet with individual writers. And potentially, if you wanted to, you could just sort of roll that up and aggregate it into one. So a content manager could work with each of the writers via a sheet. But with that in mind, I realized that the writers were going to be more of a revolving door. So I didn't want to train them on Trello. So anyone that I was working with long term, I'd bring them onto Trello for whatever we were doing. But if it was more transient, more freelance, more random people coming in and out, you don't have to train someone on a spreadsheet. I require, Google Docs as part of the knowledge that someone has, Google Docs, Google Sheets, the whole suite. So at that point, it makes training a non-issue and it just keeps it simple. I there's obviously flaws in using Sheets for certain things or Excel, but for the simple tasks that I was working on, it seemed to be okay. Now, the other thing I'll mention is around just the communication. So sometimes people feel like, oh, if I just had the budget to hire a full team, and
Mm.
I would just be able to get everything done because I could just hire people, and they feel like there's no issues with that. Well, every time you hire someone on your team, there's another communication channel. And let's say you had the budget
Yep.
to, let's say it was unlimited and you thought, hey, I'm going to start small. I'm going to hire 15 writers.
Mm.
So if you decided you were going to hire 15 writers and try to train them, even if you had SOPs, standard operating procedures, and documents very clearly laid out, every time you interacted and communicated with the 15 writers, that's one email you're sending. And if they reply back, maybe they have a question or two, all of a sudden, instead of having an easier time publishing and having content written, you are now stuck in your emailing back and forth. It's a nightmare. So
Mm.
I always encourage people to hire slowly. So even if you had the budget to hire 15 or 20
Mm.
people, hire one or two, train them, and
Mm.
iterate on the process. And you could do this for, any kind of hiring, whether it's writers or other tasks that you need done, but train sort of on a smaller scale, because even if you think your training materials are perfect, they are not. They're not perfect, and people will have questions. And as you get those questions, you can improve your document. So it's all about continuous improvement. So I always made sure the communication channel was open. If they had a question, if they have an issue, that they would let me know, and I would tell them, I want
Mm.
to know
Yeah.
because I'm going to improve the
Yeah.
documentation and it'll be better. And by the time, you run a few people through it, you fix all the questions, all the problems that you had in your documentation.
Yeah, and I really like what you said there by hiring slowly. I think I've been trying to work with as small a team as possible. I think that's another way of saying the same thing, because I started out in this online thing with e-commerce, and after 2 years with my first e-commerce adventure, I had I think 14 employees, and everybody was, what can you say, unexperienced. So I needed to tell everybody how to do everything, and I've talked with some of the people that I built the business with about so many times since, if we just had like a SWAT team of 2 or 3 people who really, really knew what they were doing, like a killer programmer and a really, really good dude to control the production and the buying and all this stuff, I think we would have gotten so much further, because I just spent all my day talking to these guys because they hadn't no clue like what to do. So I had to instruct them, and you feel like very productive putting 14 people to work, and you feel important, and you feel like it's just a huge company, it's a huge operation, and we made no money. We had a huge team and we got nowhere, And so I really, really learned the lesson there to really do more with less people and hire better people and spread that same budget over specialists. Because if you spend the same amount of money hiring half the amount of people, you'll probably get much further because you can devote more time yourself to work on the important stuff, right?
And, talking about specialists, I mean, it's great if you're able to hire someone that is an expert that knows more than you, and you don't have to train them. Maybe you
Yeah.
learn from them, hire
Yeah.
people that are better than you.
Yeah. Yeah. We were also doing software. We were doing like software so people could order like photo books for. We actually created the photo software for the biggest Danish retailer in photo, like 100 physical stores. And we did that with 2 or 3 people. That's one of the things that we did really well, but the rest of the business was just sailing the wrong direction. But having a super, super small team of super, super skilled developers who can work well together, I mean, that's just key if you want to develop things, right? Because you could also just hire a whole bunch of developers and have them work together, but have all that knowledge spread across that many minds. I mean, the amount of meetings and stuff that goes wrong because it's just too many brains, too many hands. It's something that I definitely had to learn, because I was so focused on the cost of each employee, just having low low salaries, but I think if I just, again, if I spread the same amount of salary over less people, I'm absolutely sure we would actually have succeeded in that first business.
Right. Yeah. The lessons we learned.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour. I want to make sure to give you some time to talk about your productivity course, because it's something that we were chatting prior to this about how we could, do something together, talk more together, and do stuff like this, because it's just really, really fun to hang out. It's awesome for me, at least, to spend my working time talking to guys like you. I learn a lot from it, and you have a course on productivity. I think that's pretty cool, and I'm also an affiliate for it, so there'll be a link in the description. But tell people a little bit about your productivity course, because that's also the reason why we're talking about this, because you are, I would say you definitely know what you're talking about there.
No, thanks. Well, I appreciate the time as well. It's always fun. Next time I'll have to structure my day differently so I could have a beer along with you. I think that's part of the experience. And
yeah, it's 9 p.m. here, and it's not 9 p.m. where you are, right?
No, but yeah, it would be a day beer,
noon?
But that's okay. I can make an exception for you. So thanks very much. My course on productivity kind of guides you through the steps that we sort of mentioned, but in a full context, and it gives you a framework. And the tagline is get more done in less time. And you can probably imagine it's about focusing and understanding what you need to work on and outlining things. So we mentioned a couple of the pieces here. The good part in the course is it helps you get those ideas out of your brain and then sort of prioritize and understand why you want to work on certain things, which helps the motivation along the way. I think sometimes people struggle with motivation. They're not sure, why they should work on something if they don't know if it's going to work. And if you understand why and why it's important to you, then the motivation will often take care of itself. So it goes through the framework, and then it helps you spec everything out. This is one of those courses where there's no fluff. It's actually pretty concise. You've gone through it, Morten, right? So pretty tight.
Yeah.
There's a few live sessions that I recorded. So we walked through some case studies and some of the things that I've accomplished. So we actually look at a month where I published 2 videos per day on YouTube, and it was ridiculous, but it really wasn't that bad.
That's a lot of stuff, yeah.
So there are a few walkthroughs like that where I show you exactly the thought process that I used and explained why I wanted to try to publish 2 videos per day and share the outcome. So there's a few things like that as well. And again, it's one of those courses where you get all the material at once. You can go through it fairly quickly, but the punchline is there's no shortcut. So this is not a shortcut course. It helps you figure out the work you need to do, but you still have to do the work and go out there and execute. So the big lesson, whether you want to check out the course or not, and I'd love it if you did, but it turns out to get a lot of work done, you have to, get your butt in the seat, get your hands on the keys or whatever the project is that you're working on, and do the work. There's no shortcut for that.
Yeah, and I like that. I like really teaching people how to just get stuff done, and then because it's not a silver bullet. I mean, you got to do it if you want to get productive, right? If you want to get stuff done, you got to get to it. And so I think it's a fine course on teaching people some basic stuff there on how to really get your butt in the seat and get it done right. Find that motivation, figure out why it's important and what's important, and then just get to it.
Thanks, Morten. Appreciate it.
Sure. And let's do this again some other time. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you. And you were very, very kind early on when I had, I think, like 50 subscribers. The channel was barely launched. You took me on your channel. I really appreciate that. And it's a pleasure having you here. Anything else? Of course, let us know where to find you. Some people on the channel might be new to you. So let us know where to find you.
Sure. So if you dig YouTube, which you probably do, check out my channel. But I also encourage you to listen to my podcast. I do interviews with people like Morten and a lot of other folks. It's long form. I really enjoy doing the podcast, even a little bit more than YouTube. And I have a ton of fun just recording. So check out the podcast if you're into it. Yeah. And if you want to, check out some of my keyword research stuff, there's a few playlists on that. And there's also a few free calculators. I didn't ask, but if people want to download all my templates and KGR, Keyword Golden Ratio Calculator. It's over at Niche Site Project. That's where all the blog stuff is, but I share all my templates freely.
Yeah, nichesiteproject.com,
Yep.
right? Yep.
So love it if you checked it out. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and here on YouTube, if you want to find Doug, it's just Doug Cunnington. Just type that into the search bar, you'll find him instantly. It's it's easy to find.
Thanks.
Cool. Well, have a good, productive day, the rest of it, and I'll head to bed.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. See you.